Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're getting pretty close to the holiday season, so Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. Today guys, we are going to talk about how to be the #1 property in your community. It's really easy right now to flip on any social media platform, especially YouTube, and see folks that are, making recommendations about big ag properties in low pressure states, and you really have to watch that advice. I'm not saying that advice is bad for that application or that area, but what I am saying is there's a lot of that information that can be very, very detrimental to the common property owner across the country, the you and I's of the world, let's say, right? That have, like my common property that I do, my average property that I do every year, like I was telling you, is between 60 to 100 acres. It's not the same world, and like I said, not taking anything from them people at all, because I'm not that guy. It might be good information for that property, but guys, on the law of averages around the entire country as a whole, it just doesn't fit. So really err on the side of caution. Like I said, we're going to go very in depth. I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers on some videos I have coming here, but it's the raw truth. Understanding the home range, guys, I think that's maybe the #1 piece. When you hear folks talk about the home range of a whitetail buck, you can often find that the information that they share with you, it talks about that home range being between 2 to 3 miles. There's some truth to that. I shared that in one of the last videos. What you need to look at, guys, is how much of that daylight movement is on your property or around your community, that daylight movement of that home range. And that daylight movement is way, way less than it is the entire home range, his whole area, let's say, right? That racetrack term that you hear me talk about, right? The daylight hours of that is just a fraction. Your goal is to be in that fraction and to promote more of that. So maybe it's 80-20 when you start, 80 dark, 20 daylight. You want that to creep up on 50-50. I'd love to tell you that it's 90% daylight and 10%, but like I said, that's not the truth. So I'm not going to tell you that. If 50-50, it's a complete game changer on what you can do to hunt or have your property set up to hunt a mature buck of any age, but especially mature bucks. So let that one sink in, guys. And the way I have this right here, I want to share with you, I've got this broke up into, the blue would be a road system, and squares are easier to talk about, but the contour is the black line here, guys. The major contour break around your entire community is how there could be multiple. I mean, I've got 2 of them here. I've got a 250 meter mark and a 300 meter mark. I got a lot of properties, around the entire country that might have 2 or 3, but you want to find where they are, how they affect your community, because guys, I'll share this with you real quick. I always tell my clients, if you were this property and we had lunch and we got on that major bench, that break in the contour, it could be a 30-foot bench, it could be a 3-foot bench, whatever that is, and we walk the community. Some of those racetracks are 2 to 3 miles. Some of them are 5 miles, but if we went to the northeast here, we'd come right back around and end up right where we left. That's that native range. So that's a learning curve, guys. I dive deeper into that with my clients. I talk about that in my habitat book that my clients get. It's really understanding what they're looking for. Like I always tell folks is, right, that spins the entire community. You might have 2 of these, but you can't take them off from it. That's their world. They want to relate to that edge. Now along that edge, where's the food? Is it low? Is it high? Where's the habitat? Are they able to scent check habitat on the correct wind and thermals when they're moving? Are they moving AM? Are they moving PM? There's so much of that ties to that, right? But that's their world. And you want to be that property. Let's just use this 40 in the center. You want to be that property that's not bumping them off that line of travel every time that you enter into the property, something we're going to talk about right here. So you want to be this neighbor. Let's just say this is your 40. You want to be very cautious about how you cross that native line of travel and what you do with it when it comes into your property, because this is what the raw truth is, guys. Most properties, whether this is your 40 or you're one of the 80s or the 160 in the community, or maybe one of the 20s, maybe one of the 10s, right? What happens is folks don't understand how powerful that is, and they start cutting it, and they're hanging tree stands on it, blowing the scent into it, or putting a food plot, forcing that buck to expose himself out into them big, beautiful food plots that we're all, told that we need, right? What happens is you break the chain. You're not the consistent unpressured property, so he leaves it, goes around you, hits it again, hits it, goes up where he's unpressured, leaves it. Every time he gets bumped off. And sadly, what happens is, guys, the more that he's bumped in your community and the more he knows where those people are, that daylight spectrum goes to 90%, 80%, 90%. The dark side of it, the daylight, goes to 10%, right? So let that one sink in, guys. That's how important understanding the home range of that whitetail really is. Neighboring pressure is number 2. So neighboring pressure here, guys, ties into just exactly what we were talking about. If you have this 40, it's very, very important that you figure out, to reach that number, you be that number 1 property, you have to figure out where are guys accessing through fields in the mornings, right? Notorious Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York. It doesn't take very long. Drive down the interstate and look, all these big, beautiful box blinds out in these fields. How are people getting into them? You know as well as I do how they're getting into them. They're walking across the fields in the morning. You have to understand that, because if you get that feel for the pressure that's coming from your neighbors, you might be that property that has to be in the stand 2 hours before they start walking in, right? You don't want to, just take a, recommendation like we said when we started this, right? Flip on the YouTube channels and somebody says, don't enter your stands until gray light during the rut. Well, if you enter your property during gray light, this guy's entering his stand right at, you're compounding the problem. You need to be ahead of it. Is that every property? Absolutely not. What I'm saying is you have to know where that pressure comes in, who's sitting on your fence lines. Maybe this 80 and these 80s, nobody sits on the fence line, and you're all sharing, you're all doing things right. But these 220s are they can't, something better, greener pastures. This guy with his 40 knows what he's doing, so I got to be right on the fence line. I've got that problem going on here in our community, and you have to know where this pressure is, because that pressure will benefit you. But you have to know when to fight fire with fire. You don't compound that problem. You let that pressure help you, but you have to get accustomed to knowing where that pressure is, like I said, to be that number 1 property in the community. Having food, guys, this is big. Talked about this in some videos. This is one right here. I wish, and it's a slow process, but once I'm able to connect with my clients and the folks that reach out to me, more and more people are understanding this. This right here, guys, is probably, I'm going to do a video on this about the top 3 or 5 things what destroy properties, and this is one of them. If you ask 100 people, how much food do you have on your property? 80 to 90 of those people are going to say, I have 4 acres of food plots. I have 6 acres of food plots. Food plots, food plots, food plots. It's a sad world right now that our brain with whitetail hunting is wrapped around a food plot. The food plot, guys, is great. I work with some great folks with food plot stuff. It's great. It's a piece of the puzzle. I wouldn't own a property that wouldn't have a food plot, but it can destroy your property, because you want to take, guys, you want to take into consideration this browse. That browse has to be at the forefront of your creation of building a property. It's not put a food plot, figure out where my blind is, and then worry about the habitat later. That's what happens. Everybody that has a property that reaches out to me, the first thing, I've got clients blowing up my phones right now that I can't get to until they're on the schedule, and maybe it's next month, maybe it's 2 months from now, maybe it's 3 months, and everybody's saying, what can I do? Where do I need to build my food plots? Food plots, food plots, food plots, right? It's a sad, sad deal. Don't worry about the food plots. We're going to build the habitat. We got bigger things to accomplish, because here's the deal, guys. What I've got here is 90% of your mentality, your acreage into food, needs to be into browse. 10% of that needs to worry about the food plots, right? So this is what most properties are. We've got, it needs to be 90% daylight movement or daylight food on a property. And most properties I see are 2%, you know, right? Because we focus on our food plots. We're not focusing on the browse. I don't care where you're at in the country, further south you go, the less important that it is, but it never, that woody browse intake, guys, never drops below 50% of their diet, period. Farther you go north, more important it is. So it's a huge, huge, huge piece of the puzzle. So not saying anything about food plots, not taking anything. I think if you reached out to the folks that we work with food plot stuff, John, Brad, everybody included, would tell you the food plots are great, but the browse is king. You can have, guys, so to finish this one, my clients struggle with this around the country. Until we're able to educate folks, everybody struggles. You can have the best food plot in the world. You can have you know, focus on your soil health once you get there. You can have 30-inch brassicas. You can have beautiful, beautiful food. Great clover, great brassicas, everything tied in. If you don't have the browse that backs up those food plots, someone else is going to have your deer, period. You may get them deer, probably will get them deer on camera on your property at dark, but what good is that food plot doing you if you're not getting daylight movement? The better the habitat browse is, the better that is, the better your food plots are going to be. The less pressure on your food plots, the better they're going to grow. But it's all about stationary deer and carrying capacity of a property, not just focused on how much tons of food that we can get. And here's what I'll close on this one, guys. A food plot offers, is it 500 pounds an acre, 200 pounds per acre? The average browse on a select cut property will reach or exceed 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of food. 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of food per acre. Guys, you can't physically have any food plot. Corn, beans, you can't reach it. It doesn't even come close. That's how important that is. And if you don't have that in that system, someone else is going to have it, and you're part of a fragmented community that you hear me talk of. So number 4 here, guys, low impact, right? Keeping that property very low impact, whether it's a 10, a 20, a 40, an 80, whatever that case is, keeping it very low impact. Guys, you hear me talk of this, I'm gonna, like I said, every one of these videos, right, leads into other things. Here's what a lot of folks don't understand on this. Every property has a blueprint, right? It has a native line of travel that deer are already doing things that they're doing now. When we get there, or what I educate folks are on, is when you see that, when you find that postseason scouting, you're going to be able to use some of that, but you're not going to be able to use all of it, because some of it is too far internal, or some of it leads off the property and we want to spin them around the property, something like that. You need to find it. You need to, you know, educate yourself on where it is, but every property has a blueprint. So what I'm saying is, guys, let's say that this, and we're going to do videos on this, you know, coming up here more in depth, but let's say this is your south fence row, right? And we walk that, and the whole line of travel, all of this is just a ridge system here, and your access, where you have to access in, is below that line of travel. Well, you could, on a 40 or an 80 or a 20 or whatever the case is, guys, you could go that whole 40, that whole southern fence row of that 40, and always be below the line of travel. All of them stands then could potentially be, unless it's a leeward situation, could potentially be PM sits, because they're below the line of travel. Unless you have a way, another access plan to get above it, them are all PM. You cannot change that blueprint. You cannot change it. You can't, you couldn't take enough excavation equipment in there to change it. It's not gonna happen, right? So that's where most folks go wrong on these small properties, are trying to create something that the property's never gonna be. You have to really acknowledge what that has to offer. The best property is, obviously, you start walking down here, some of it's below you, some of it's above you, so you have a combination in your stand assemblage. You have AM and PM stands, right? That's already laid out. That's already set in stone. We just need to find where that stand is, because once I'm at that stand, guys, when I go to a stand and I'm helping you figure out where that stand needs to be, I know where that stand is already for which wind, and it's AM, PM. When we get there, I'm not thinking about the wind first and then hanging a stand. It's already blueprinted. Where that stand's got to be is where that stand's got to be. And it's not, hey, I got a predominant, another video we got coming up, a predominant northwest or southwest wind, and this is my access, but I have to go over the line of travel and I got to go over there to hang the stand. Don't do that. You have to stay. Your access is what tells you where the stand needs to be. Your stand needs to be there. Then you hunt it on which wind that's supposed to be. You don't do it in reverse. It's a huge, huge deal. So the impact part of it, and I got extra property. If you own private land, look for public ground. Find another piece down the chain. You can hunt the same deer that you're hunting on this 40 acres a mile from here if you know the contour and how the whole community connects. Find a lease property. If the smaller the property is, the more you have to micromanage it. So if you got 40, maybe it's one guy, maybe it's two guys, maybe it's three potentially that hunt it. But you cannot overpressure that. And if you don't have, let's just say your property just doesn't permit a lot of west wind opportunity for a PM sit. Don't force it to be that. Go look somewhere else. Find another property that does offer that. It keeps the pressure. It keeps you out of trouble. It happens a lot on any property, especially small properties. Let's touch on this one real quick, guys. Number 5, FSI versus TSI. FSI, guys, is your forest stand improvement. That, let's just say that this is where a line of travel that we're promoting that's going to end up around 40 acres, right? The inside of that, guys, the interior of this is FSI. Anything that is deer, now ridge country could be broken into sections, but FSI is internal. Anything to do with deer habitat, right? Better deer food. FSI, forest stand improvement, meaning the forest floor is gaining more daylight. TSI is to the outside. TSI, timber stand improvement. Sadly, guys, and so to finish that, TSI is where you want your access. If you got ridge country, wherever your access is your TSI. What it is, less vegetation on the ground, less potential deer bedding. Food promotes bedding, and you don't want that by your access, right? More daylight you let in, more potential you're going to have to create more browse. It can't be where your access is. So FSI to where your deer are at, hopefully the core, right? And TSI to the exterior. FSI to the core, TSI to the outside. Biologist and large acreage. Cut your maple 1 year, go in and cut your oaks, don't cut your red oaks, cut your white. There is so much information out there, right? Here's the problem is, guys, these big channels that you're watching and this big timber stand improvement TSI mentality, yes, if you do timber, you're going to interrupt the soil by driving over it, you're going to interrupt the soil bank, you're going to let daylight in, and it's going to hit the forest floor. It's going to regenerate and create deer food. Here's the problem is, guys, if you go in here and you allow this mentality or this forester to go in and just select this from top to bottom, you're going to destroy the entire property. You totally create a property that you can't get in and out of without blowing deer, and you don't have the opportunity to have multiple pieces of the puzzle on a small property. So a lot of this, folks, a lot of this information is on this big property, big acreage, whether it's high pressured or low pressured, but it's all focused on a volume, and you can't do that on a small property, period. You have to have the best property for a whitetail property. That it's a whitetail plan going into it. The best small properties that are number one are the ones that, when it comes to logging, comes to TSI and FSI, has TSI, FSI, it has a little bit of hinge cutting, has a little bit of hack and squirt, all together, has food plots, right? Has all of it together. So there's parts that we can learn, like hack and squirt methods. Burning might be one of the tools, right? But you can't just use a blanket a one hat fits all, let's say. I have to do this because such and such said that I have to go in and remove all my big timber, and the only way I can get this big timber to produce is to select cut the entire thing. Here's the problem. It may be the truth, but where are you doing it? You have to know, guys, where your line of travel, where you're promoting more daylight, which side of that line of travel you're promoting it on, because if you cut over that line, if your FSI creeps over or your TSI creeps in, what's going to happen is you're cutting over your promoted line of travel. Then what you've got is you're placing deer there or giving them an opportunity when they're cruising, scent checking, early season, late season strategies, everything combined. You're giving them a reason to be there when you're not able to hunt them, period. It totally destroys small property mentality. Or small property, and it's a mentality destroyer. These guys are the ones that jump out to me, how to be the best property in the neighborhood. Taking all of this and making it the best that it can possibly be. But like I said, guys, this whole piece of this right here is kind of my push on this video, if you will. Make that a property that's good for them and not always just good for us. Time and time again, I see what happens is, guys, folks are building stuff that's good for us, but it's not good for them. And it'll never put you in the same spot at the same time. We've got a food plot situation we're going to talk about coming up here that I think will open some eyes. You have to think like a deer. Don't think like a human. Think like a deer, and then put yourself to the outside of that on a hunter side of it, and you will be successful. But if you go into it thinking like the deer or thinking like the human, you're going to build it what's good for you, and it's not going to be good for them. So that's the like I said, guys, the ones that jump out to me on this one, how to make your property the #1 property in the community, whether it's an 80, 160, a 40, whatever that case is, a 10 or a 20. You have to be able to focus on all of this and make all of it work for you and be firing out all cylinders, if you will. Thanks, guys.